All right, we're back for episode 10 with for On the Spot. I got a interesting guest here. Her name is Nethmi. She's actually my sister-in-law. Welcome to the show, Nethmi.
Thank you.
A little bit about Nethmi. Yes, so I married her sister. I guess you could say, a lot of in-laws, they have sort of love-hate relationships, but for us, it's probably a tolerate
Hate.
or hate.
Hate,
Oh,
hate.
okay, sure, good to know. But I've got her on the show today. I think she's going through an interesting period in her life, and I want to sort of pick her brain on how she's planning to navigate through this really interesting period in her life, which I imagine a lot of people can relate to. So I guess we'll probably delve into maybe career development, personal development, self-confidence, things like that. But I guess we'll see where this conversation takes us. Does that sound about right?
Yep, sounds
Cool.
good.
So maybe Nethmi, do you want to give us a bit of context on what's going through your mind the most these days in terms of those topics, or where you're at with your career and where you plan to go?
Um, well, I'm currently at an age where I think the biggest things is to decide where I want to go in my career in terms of career path and type of career, but also whether I guess looking into a 5 year timeline, what's most important to me and what's priority in terms of kids, family, career, and choosing, both or one at least. So been doing a lot of career development and personal development to help me decide what priorities I want to set.
Excellent, excellent. So that I'm sure most of us go through something like that at some point in our lives. So I think a lot of people can hopefully relate to this. So I guess to set the context, I have to be wary of that. I know a bit of your history, so I can't just assume that everyone else does. So perhaps, do you want to talk a little bit about the job that you were at and the job you're currently at, and I guess how you're finding the comparison between the two?
Sure. So I guess my previous job was my first proper job, in which I guess I grew up in. I started there when I was 17, 18, part time, while I was studying, and eventually went on to work full time there. I had an interesting manager and mentor, and there was a lot of, I guess, things that I put up with in my previous job because I didn't know any better. And now I have been very lucky to move on to a very open and honest workplace, in which I've been given, I guess, permission to make mistakes and to learn from them, and the support that I need to grow, both personally and professionally. And I've been doing a lot of comparison between the two, and only now that I've gone on to a workplace with such an amazing culture is when I can see all the negativity that I was working in previously. I guess when you're in that position, you don't really feel it or know any better. So it's really hit me hard in the last 10 months or so, about what I went through, and how people are still being treated that way currently, although I've gotten out of that place. A lot of my colleagues, my ex colleagues, are still going through it. So, yeah.
Do you mind? I guess it's one thing to say. Essentially, in summary, your previous job sucked,
Mm.
and your current job is the dream, or
Yeah.
almost the dream, which
Yeah.
is great. That's awesome. So the one that sucked, are you able to? Feel free to say no, but are you able to give an example or two of why it sucked? Maybe just to give some, just something to visualize or picture in people's heads of. what makes potentially a bad job or a bad mentor or role model.
Um, I'll give you a couple of examples. One example is when I was offered a full time job after I finished my studies. I was promised a lot of things in terms of professional development and training and things like that. And I later found out that the promises that were made from my manager, because she promised to train me on certain, so for example, writing grants and things like that. I later on found out that she was never the one who wrote the grants for our organisation, or she didn't have anything to do with it. So that was something, one tiny, well, I guess it was a big thing for me, but and then there was other things such as if you were sick and you weren't able to come into work, you have to call. You can't text. You have to call and explain yourself.
You have
Um,
to
explain.
explain, and what it would your boss say that's not a good enough reason?
Yep, there were times when she would do
Jeez.
that. Yep.
Okay.
So for me, growing up in that environment, I thought that was normal. I thought that's what all organisations had to do. You couldn't text and say, "Oh, I'm feeling sick." You had to call. So I would be terrified of calling in sick sometimes, having to speak to my manager, thinking she's not going to believe me and things like that.
Right. That's messed up.
Yeah, that's very messed up. And little things like that, then.
So you could be sick and still, I don't know, I'm just trying to think about the psychology of that call. You'll call and you might even think of trying to sound sicker than you already are.
Yep.
Just to make
To
sure
prove-
that she's
yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah.
There was a time when I did the colour run for the Royal Children's and I twisted my ankle, and I called in saying I had hurt myself, and I was in the city and I had to get to Box Hill on public transport, and I was ready to go home because I was in so much pain. But because they couldn't cover my shift, I still had to go in and do the full shift. Little things like that. But I think all of that sort of builds this fear in, I guess it's more of an authoritative role that my manager had, not as a leader, but she, I guess, enforced authority rather than being a friendly and supportive leader, if that makes sense. Yeah, and I guess little things sort of built up, and there was a lot of fear, and it still exists in that workplace. Yeah.
Maybe if you're happy to talk about, in your current job, you have something I'm quite jealous about. You have all these opportunities to grow yourself, where I guess I don't think we have that necessarily in like my field, but it's fine. But yeah, you get to go to all these sort of workshops and leadership workshops. Do you want to tell the listeners about that workshop that you had where you found it unusual that you didn't pick up on something that everyone else did? I thought that was really interesting.
Sure. So I went to a Leadership Victoria training, which was called, I think it was called Leadership Evolution, in which you have to think of a challenge that you are currently dealing with at work, and the workshop helps you to grow yourself and to sort of look at the problem in different perspectives and things like that. On the second day of our workshop, I believe it was, there was an incident which sort of hit me quite hard and quite confronting. So we got to know our facilitators. It was a lady and a man. And they were both very friendly and very open and approachable people. And I knew this from talking to them at lunchtime and things like that. And the man himself, Stephen, he was quite an impressive guy. He had become CEO of a chain of very successful hospital chains in Europe at the age of 26 or 27. It was quite remarkable. And so I went and spoke to him about some of the difficulties I was having, and he was asking me a few questions. I told him about my previous workplace and the issues I was having with my manager and things like that. Anyway, after lunch, we had this. He explained to us what we needed to do, and he said, "Now turn around and speak to your group about or discussing your groups." We all turned around to our tables and started talking to our peers about the question that he mentioned. And suddenly he got up and yelled, "I told you to discuss amongst each other. Why aren't you doing that?" And then
Like aggressively.
very aggressively and very loud. And I turned around and looked at him and went, "Oh, he probably wants us to talk in a class setting, not just in our little groups." So anyway, everyone slowly got up and started moving around and talking to other tables and things like that. Later on that day, towards the end of the day, he he got up in front of everyone and said, "Did anyone notice how I was acting before?" And some of the other people in the class put their hand up and said, "We thought you were really aggressive, and we were shocked that you spoke to us like that, yelling in front of everyone." And they were just, one of the girls said, "Oh, my heart is still beating really fast from that situation."
That's
and
sad.
yeah, it's quite interesting. And I was sitting there wondering what they're talking about. I was like, "Oh, did I miss something?" And he turned around to one of the girls and said, "I'm sorry, I was looking at you when I yelled as well." And I said, "When did he yell? I don't remember him yelling." And then everyone else is putting their hand up and telling him how they felt. I put my hand up and I said, "Is it weird that I didn't even notice or don't know what you're talking about?" And they all started laughing. And he said, "Why do you think that is?" And I was like, "I don't know." And then he said, "Do you think you've had like these kind of situations so many times in your past that you're kind of just oblivious to it now?" And it hit me because that's how my previous manager used to talk to everyone. She would get up in the middle of the workplace and just yell at people, and that's just the way she did everything. And I thought that was normal. And although now I've come to a new workplace and I know it's not the norm, I think I'm still sort of oblivious to that kind of behavior, and I don't talk up or tell people off for behaving badly, and it was quite confronting for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because you don't let me get away with anything, but
Yeah.
I guess I guess it's a bit selective. But I don't know what to make of that. Whether there is something there in terms of because of your previous boss or previous experiences, or it's just a once-off thing. But
also I think culturally we've always, like, my dad also, like, that's how he speaks, or quite authoritative, right? So maybe it's something from childhood, but yeah, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. But I guess so that I guess this is a good segue to go into the topic of self-confidence and self-esteem. I think most of us, if not all of us, have had some issues with that during their lifetime, especially during that school period. I think for me that was a really, we're all trying to find ourselves and trying to be relevant and trying to fit in. And then I guess there's a really good quote. I will probably butcher it because I didn't plan to say this, but something along the lines of, you grow up and you think everyone's thinking about you, and then you grow up into your 30s and 40s and you realize that it doesn't matter. And then when you get into your 50s and 60s, you realize they weren't thinking about you at all. Like, they've got their own things to think about. But I guess everyone perhaps learns that at different times. Perhaps people don't learn it at all. There's a lot of self-conscious adults, even a lot of my patients, into their 60s or 70s or 80s. Some are still they don't have confidence. It's bizarre to think about. But I guess if we run along the line of that, you do have, let's say, and that's an area of improvement for you to maybe build some more confidence. What does that journey look like? How do you, how does one build confidence?
Um, I'll go back to the training that I had. Um, something that we agreed on is the I guess before the class started, um, we were put into evolution groups, so smaller groups of people that you can discuss your challenge with and they can help you through it. And one of the things we agreed on as a group is if you see something in someone which isn't, which in your opinion may not necessarily help them be a better leader, to point it out. And a few people told me that they've noticed that I apologize for no reason. So it might be simply, saying, oh, sorry to disturb you, or, saying at the end, oh, I'm sorry. You might think that it was kind of silly or whatever. And I always put myself down after I express my opinion. And one of the things I've been working on is so
Not
I
on
went,
purpose. It's just how you speak.
subconsciously I think I just do it to sort of back up. I think if I share my opinion and it sounded silly, if I say sorry, it's kind of, if I'm apologetic about it,
Right.
then people might not take it badly or whatever. So when I went back into work the next week, I told my colleagues, I said, if you notice something, just let me know. And I started counting how many times I apologize for no reason. In meetings and whatever it is, a lot of people pointed it out. I had 7 strikes by the end of that week.
That's just the stuff that they heard.
They heard, yeah.
Or were in tune to, yes.
That's right,
So
yeah.
at least 7.
Yeah. And I have been working, consciously trying to avoid apologizing for no reason. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to be more confident in my work and my opinion, and how I share my opinion. And hopefully it'll help me become a better leader and a more confident leader. So that's something I'm trying to do in terms of self-esteem. But I'm also seeking counselling to be able to help me through the process as well, to identify, triggers and things that I can help to look out for. So a few things going on at the moment.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. I think we're very proud of you anyway, but we just want you to be proud of yourself, which is a matter of time, I think. Can I ask you a question? So, of course, how long were you at your terrible job?
5 years.
Would you change that if you did it all over again? Let's say, and you had the opportunity to work at your current job from the age of 18, would you have?
No.
Why is that?
I think I wouldn't appreciate what I have in a lot of ways. That I think I truly, I don't know how to express this the way I really, really appreciate what I have now, in terms of the support and everything else that comes with this workplace. And the only reason I'm able to do that is because I compare everything I've gone through and the personalities that were at the old place. And if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be who I am today. So, yeah.
Interesting. That's I thought that you would say that, but it's interesting, right? You, during that period, it might have even messed you up a little bit, but you wouldn't necessarily change it.
Yeah.
When I was in doing emergency, like this is years ago, one of my seniors, I think I was stressed or something, and he told me, Gihan, sometimes you have to eat shit. Some people will always give you shit. Some of it you have to eat. And he was just joking, but that's always stuck with me. And I think there's something profound about it as well, that there is something to the adversity that we all
Mm.
have to go through, and perhaps it's a lesson to not shy away from it if it's there, to take something positive from it, not necessarily stay there forever, but yeah, take something from it, even if it is just a comparison, which is valuable, right? I don't think, yeah, I agree. I don't think you would have been. You had a few colleagues that have worked there first, right? And then they've gone to other places and realized that they had it real good at your current job.
Yeah, yeah. And the really great culture at my current workplace is that whenever we have, lunches at my CEO's house or my operations manager's house, all the ex staff members attend still because they have that great relationship.
Unusual.
Yeah,
Very
and talking
unusual.
to them, they want to come back. They are desperate to come back, or and they're open to it. A lot of the people who have left are because of either maternity or family reasons, or because they went on to one of them was studying nursing and she went on to become a nurse and things like that. Um, but they all say, everyone I've spoken to anyway, they want to come back to the organisation in the future. So
Amazing.
it's really nice. Yeah.
And perhaps another lesson there that I don't know, maybe it's worth talking about, is the fact that although that first job sucked, you went to this new job on a lower pay, right? So knowing that, how do you think that affects your decision making, or does it affect your decision making going forward?
Um, can you
Yeah,
explain that?
so the idea of is essentially, because I remember when you were deciding to go from that old job to this new job, you were looking at like the income as well. So from my understanding, it was slightly less than than that old job, but
Yeah.
you still took the new job, and
Yeah.
obviously it's been an amazing thing for you.
Yeah.
Do you think in the future that would affect how you decide which type of job you would go into?
Yeah, I think it was one of the greatest decisions I've made to take a pay cut because I just wanted to get out of that place. I think it got to a point where I thought it's too much for me to handle. It was affecting my personal life, and I wasn't growing as a person professionally and personally. Um, and when I guess when I had 3 interviews with my for my current organisation when I was hired, and throughout the process there was a lot of promises made. So there was we're gonna support you. We're gonna the culture's really great. Blah blah blah. And in my head I was like, that's too good to be true. It's never gonna be like that. People, of course, they just want you to come on board. They'll say anything. But I am really grateful that I made that decision to come across, because everything that they promised has been true, and they have delivered on those promises. So yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like they've promised better things than the old job and followed through.
Yeah.
Which is the dream. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Uh, One of my final questions: where do you see yourself 10 years?
10 years, I'd love to be in an executive position um, at an maybe a not-for-profit organization, because from everything I've heard and experienced, they have a really great culture, and that'll be the dream. But in terms of financially, in 10 years, I have to see if it's maybe better off to go with a not-for-profit or for a profit organization. But who knows? We'll see. It'll be really good to have developed a lot further in my career in 10 years. So
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, I think we're probably at about time now. So I'd like to acknowledge you. I think, I mean, both myself and your sister obviously think highly of you, even if you don't at times. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, for your wedding, do you remember what I said in my speech?
No.
I said that we will both watch you do great things, but sometimes you stand in your way. So we're waiting, and we know it's going to happen. So it's just a matter of time. Just got to be patient, which you lack. You lack a lot of patience.
Yeah, I do. I've heard that too many times. I've got to work on that. Yeah.
I'm just joking. Well, I'm not joking.
No,
but,
I get
I
it.
mean that in
I
a
see
loving
that too.
way.
No, I see that too. So.
But, keeping in mind, you're like, what, 20, 22, 23?
26.
26 years old. Yeah, so, I mean, you're probably a quarter of your way through your life, so big things ahead. But, yeah, we'll take the back seat and watch proudly like two Sri Lankan parents. Anything else you want to say? Closing remarks?
No, thank you for the chat.
Of course. No, thank you. Let's call it.